We have a very special program and speaker with the city manager, Tina Friend. Ms. Friend is a city management and public policy professional with special expertise in communications and public law. She was appointed in 2021 by the mayor and city council of Coronado. She is proud to be city manager of the city, where she manages a full-service city with a total of $100 million budget. With its 253 dedicated employees, Coronado delivers a broad array of community services from police, dispatch to fire, library, recreation, and golf. Coronado is a host to Naval Base Coronado, a master helicopter base, home port to 3 aircraft carriers, and the training center for the Navy SEALs. The city maintains a strong linkage to military operations and Navy families. Ms. Friend has had a very busy couple of years overseeing repairs to the Parker Pump Station, managing high turnover of city staff, including the hiring of a fire and police chief, and the city council ratification of the housing element update, among other important issues. Prior to joining Coronado, Ms. Friend worked with local government in Santa Cruz County for over 16 years. She served as the city manager of Scotts Valley and assistant city manager for the city of Santa Cruz. In those roles, she managed several disasters, including a major wildland fire requiring the evacuation of the city. Ms. Friend holds a Juris Doctor degree from Santa Clara University School of Law with an emphasis on public law, and a Master of Public Policy degree from Georgetown University. Her undergraduate degree is a BS magna cum laude from the University of Idaho. Please welcome Ms. Tina Friend.
Good morning, and I think I need to shorten that bio. Yeah, quite a bit. So I'll work on that for next time. But thank you so much for welcoming me back. I was last year in 2022, and I really enjoyed the discussion and the questions. So what I have for you today, and let me know if I also speak too quickly, because I absolutely can do that, because I'm always very passionate and excited about city things and can talk at length. So just let me know if I need to slow up as well. But I'm very happy to deliver like an overview, a state of the city of what's happening in the city of Coronado. And one thing I do love about this community is that I know that all of you, the level of information you have is far, far higher than an average resident in another city. And so that is something I enjoy. So I do expect hard questions at the end and more detail. So I will give you an overview, and I know we'll really get into the meat of it with the discussion. But in talking about the state of the city, I can say overall that things are going very well. I would say the state of the city is extremely strong. We enjoy a wonderful budget position. We have extremely strong reserves. We have 254 now extremely dedicated, hardworking staff, and a bevy of projects that just make Coronado better and better every year. So I have nothing but excitement coming into 2025. So I first want to touch on one thing. Everyone's probably aware of this, but if you haven't heard, the City Council made a very important decision on Tuesday night. The final council vacancy was filled with Ms. Kelly Purvis. I know many of you know her. She's been a resident for a long time, involved in all sorts of wonderful things. So Councilmember appointee Purvis will be sworn in at the next council meeting on February 4th. And we look forward to having our full council because we have a lot of business we're going to be setting forth. Okay, so I first wanted to walk down to the memory lane here, and Councilmember Donovan, nice to see you there as well. About 2024 was a very busy year. So if you weren't watching, we had a couple of years in 22 and 23 where we had a lot of processing, preparing, and getting initiatives and policies and ideas ready for the council to approve. And boy, we went through a lot. So I just wanted to run down this list and give you an update on these activities and on what's coming for the future. So the first one on top, the wind room renovation, here we are in the wind room, and we know its shortcomings, from the aesthetic to the structural to the AV components that really limit the full potential of this. So council went through a very intensive process to examine all the permutations of what are the needs of the community and what are the different visions for this room can we do and what can we afford. And so ultimately, and we had a council subcommittee that actually convened twice to work on this, and all this information is online, but the culmination of this in the fall was that council approved about a $9 million renovation to really make this a spectacular room. So the next steps on that is that we are going back out to an architect to start doing some detailed architectural drawings. Once we have that, we'll be able to bid it for construction. But also, I'll just note that price tag too, so for the future, say about $10 million for that project. The next one's a Case Park master plan. And you know, when I came on board, like, so before I even arrived in Coronado, I was getting calls from people that they wanted to talk to me about the Case Park and master plan, which was amazing to me. So some of my very first meetings on the island were about the Case Park, and this is in September of 21. So we've all been through this. I don't need to rehash it, but a lot of passions, a lot of ideas. And it's a park that the city has not invested much in, and very much the community, the broader community wanted a grander vision for it. So we went through a very careful process, and many of you participated in that, and thank you so much, because it was meeting after meeting after meeting. But where we landed on that is with a broad-based design for the Case Park. The price tag on that is probably about $28 million, but if you're talking about a 16-acre park, it's an enormous size, and you're thinking about the addition of the dog park and reorienting the fields and upgrading a number of things and facilities. That's how much those things cost. That's very exciting. So where we are in that process is that we are similar to the wind room. We have to do the next step of design and technical drawings and more refined costing. And once we have that done, there'll be more discussions with the community around amenities and how exactly we go forward. But they will take time. Next one, cross-border water pollution. Made a lot of strides in that, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, so I'll put a pin in that. Undergrounding projects. This is also something that has been very, very slow to move forward, but we have 3 principal undergrounding projects we're working on. We have Adela and Inez, we have First Street, and we have down at the Strand. Yes, sir? What do you mean by undergrounding? Oh, thank you very much. That's an excellent question. What do I mean by undergrounding? Undergrounding of power utilities. So taking the poles that have the lines overhead and putting those lines underground. So you have the benefit of more integrity of the electrical system, more durability, less power outages, and of course, a vast aesthetic improvement. So thank you for that. So we made progress in this, and in fact, we're going to construction on Adela and Inez this year. And First Street, we really need to move that forward because there's some intersection with the Navy on that as well. Also last year, we launched the Circuit Shuttle pilot program, the Island Express, and that ran for 6 months up until early December. Had a lot of feedback on that, a lot of users. And the city right now is grappling with the cost and if that service might be continued. It's a very costly service. If we ran it year round, it would be about $1.2 to $1.5 million. So we have to think about, you know, the general fund, where's the correct allocation of resources and other ways to offset that with grants or user fees, et cetera. But it was a very interesting pilot. We learned a lot from it. And that was an example of the city council wanting to really try something and say, is this a fit for us? And so we will continue to work on that as well as the summer shuttle bus. Last year, we renovated the aquatic center. And so for the swimmers out there who were deprived of the pool for so long, thank you so much for your patience. That level of renovation was far overdue, years overdue, frankly. And so the magnitude of intervention and changes and corrections we had to make took us a while. But now we have a beautiful sparkling facility. If you didn't hear, even Katie Ledecky came and visited us like a few months after it opened. So that was very exciting. The director's like, hey, look who dropped by the pool today. Just an Olympian. And she said, love your pool. It's fantastic. So well, of course it is. That's great. Another big one, and this was referenced earlier, is he certified the housing element update. And you all know this. This is something that would really just been an albatross. Just getting this done. We were assigned a completely untenable housing target to meet. It was just unachievable. We pursued legal action to the farthest extent we could. And in the end of the day, we found a way to get it done through a lot of creativity, working with Sacramento and the Navy. So the Navy was absolutely fantastic, but we got there. So we're certified with the state. The Coastal Commission approved it. Now you will see something on this in a future city council agenda because the Coastal Commission wanted a few little tweaks to it. So we have to bring that back and change our ordinance in a few different ways. For instance, on some of the opportunity sites we identified in the plan for housing development, they did not want basements. Okay, so we're going to change that so those opportunity sites can't have basements. And a few other things that materially won't change it for the rest of us, but it was, you really can't underscore how significant it was to get that done. Because when you're staring down 1,000 units in already very, built, intense use place, what do you do? But we got there, but we're looking to the next cycle now too, because we never want to end up in the same position. We also worked on e-bike policies, and so this January we had some changes. The city council approved banning all e-bike operation from all city sidewalks in town, as well as the Paseo by the Dell, the boardwalk by the shores, and the promenade by Gloria Bay. So e-bikes can be walked there, but they can't be ridden to avoid that pedestrian conflict and just keep it safer. We were also the very first community in San Diego County to approve an e-bike ban for operators under 12. So youth 11 and under are not allowed to operate e-bikes. They may ride on them, but they can't operate them. And this was a bill, so our Assembly member Tasha Berner really fought for this in Sacramento. And so she had an e-bike bill that was actually much stronger and had much greater elements in terms of certification and training requirements. That got watered down through the legislative process and turned into basically this. But we were the first city to adopt it. The city council did it basically right away. And so we're really watching that and hoping that this helps with some of the behaviors and safety issues with e-bikes. And a final thing too is we are launching a great program with Coronado Unified School District, an education and training program where if the youth coming onto campus and want to park their bikes for the day have to go through a training program in order to have the privilege of parking there. So it's another way we really want to focus on education, enforcement, safe behaviors, just avoid all the conflicts that are happening. We don't think this work is done yet, but this is the work we've done so far. We're going to watch it, and we know this is a huge importance to the community. Beach fire ordinance, I won't go through all of that, but last summer, we I think 3 or 4 iterations before we landed on the policy where wood burning beach fires are allowed on Main Beach, but we're really trying to look out for South Beach and the shores because they were getting enormous amounts of smoke coming into their units from fires. And so this is something that council really worked on, heard a lot from the community, and there's going to be more news to come in terms of beach fires in the future, so stay tuned. Historic program, the context survey. Now, this is something that we've looked at for a while, and actually Council Member Donovan was on the initial subcommittee to say, we want to really look at how we're looking at our historic properties and what we want to designate, what has to be reviewed, what doesn't need to be reviewed, rather than every single property over 75 years of age would have to be reviewed. So, which is the current paradigm right now. And so we went through this process where every home in town had a visual inspection and visual categorization into likely to meet a historic designation or not. And then we reached out to everyone, said, do we need to change that? Do we have feedback or not? And brought back the policy. So the policy council directed us to implement at the end of last year was a couple of things. One is to maintain that 75 years threshold. So that still is the threshold. There was talk of moving it down to 50, but it's still 75 years. And then also through that survey of all the homes in town, they were divided into tiers in terms of likeliness that they would actually be designated historic. And the council said there was a third tier, which was basically the property had been changed so much that it likely wasn't going to be at all considered for as historic property. We don't need to review those. So what this does is that takes that entire list of about 1,600 properties, takes it off the rolls and makes it a much quicker process. So we're going to bring those ordinances back for implementation. I know it's really technical, but it really affects a lot of us. So I wanted to mention it. It was years of work to get to this point. And then finally here, we also worked on park and recreation policies and our fee schedule. So we have a number of policies about how rooms are used, how tennis fees happen. And it's just things that in good governance you need to look at from time to time and make sure that we've got fair policies, they make sense, they're easy to understand and administer. And so it sounds pretty bureaucratic, it kind of was, but the end result for you is that we've got much cleaner process to rent facilities, to access things, and our fees will help support programs a little bit more than they were. So this is a big year. I mean, in most cities, the policy, and I didn't even get into projects and construction. This is just the policy work that the city council had. So we had very robust agendas. Everyone worked so hard, and I'm just very proud of the community engagement, our staff work, council's courage to make hard choices on things. Okay, so priorities. So thinking ahead to 2025, if you ask me, what are your priorities for the city? And Tina, what do you think about? So these are the things I think about as like the top issues, and they're fairly broad, but what this means for me is that every single week I am doing something on all 4 of these to advance them, to make sure that we are investing time and work and taking the city forward. So the first one, cross-water border pollution, I'll get into that, modernizing city infrastructure, and that is with a strong emphasis on stormwater and wastewater, of course, but also our streets and alleys and other things as well. But just the core basic infrastructure of the city. It's something that's really important to me, that our systems function very well for you. And so something that I'm very excited to be spending a lot of time on. Third one down is organizational excellence. So, you already mentioned we have an organization of about 250 employees. So there's a lot of internal systems that we have. Things like how we manage information, how do we talk to one another, how our HR works. So again, just organizational things, it's not really community facing. But if we don't do those internal things well, it can be very inefficient, it can be frustrating for our team, and we're not delivering the best outcomes back to the community. So what I found coming into the organization is that in many respects, we were just very much living moment by moment and had not modernized a lot of systems. So I'm looking forward to doing a number of initiatives to really make sure that we are cutting edge and a great place to work so we can attract and keep the best and deliver services even better for the community. And then finally, future planning. We have to maintain that long-range vision around where we're going, what's important. Are we setting the right pieces in place now to help for the future? Are we thinking about how we're going to finance some of these large-scale projects, et cetera? So I'll take a minute and just walk through these briefly. So this is the ocean water or cross-border water pollution. This really is number one. And this has been written about, ad nauseum in all of our papers. We all know a lot about it. Again, the sophistication in town, the level of knowledge is huge, but I just wanted to reiterate, in case there's any doubt, just this is number one. We have a lot of resources and time, dedication from the city council and staff to work on this. We have a council subcommittee, and right now that consists of Mayor Duncan and Councilmember Fleming. We also have Councilmember Downey is very involved in the National League of Cities, and she's still on that, and special environmental committees. And there is a number of federal advocacy trips they've gone on to not only meet with our delegation, but also widen the broad base of support. So in many cases, there's been a lot of outreach to Navy SEALs that now represent different parts of the country. And that's been a really compelling and effective way to get people who might not be on one side of the aisle together to say, no, this is a joint problem. This is a national problem. And we need to, and that has been so incredibly effective. And I really saw that come to life last year. We have the mayors on the IBWC Citizens Forum, and as you know, the IBWC is the organization that's managing the treatment plant down at the border, and really making sure we have transparency and integrity of that work there, and maintaining the advocacy for Coronado. National League of Cities, U.S. Conference of Mayors, these are other national organizations that we're involved in, again, for the point of partnership development, getting people to sign on and support and say, no, this is a priority. We need to keep the money coming. We have federal lobbyists that are very effective. And then, of course, regional partnerships. And I'd say, excuse me, in 2024, we really saw a large expansion of the regional attention on this issue, where when I first arrived in town, it wasn't really there in the same way. I felt like it was Coronado doing it. But since then, it's really been a great confluence. So I feel that things are poised better than ever to really make great strides on this. And for instance, the most recent action is that in December, in some emergency legislation, another $250 million was appropriated. So now it's up to about $600 million is available. IBWC is working on projects, getting those better, and those will complete over the scale of the next 5 to 7 years. So we'll wait a little bit to have those come to full fruition. However, the SAB plant, that's the plant in Mexico, is coming online this spring. I don't have a more precise date because that date has changed like 3 times. So I don't want to say, oh, it's going to happen at the end of January, but it will be this spring. And what's so significant about that is that's going to take 18 million gallons of wastewater and get that cleaned, whereas before that was just straight raw sewage flowing into the ocean. And then the summer currents were bringing that right up into the US. And so that will be, so this summer, this will be our first summer in decades that plant has been operational. So I'm very, very excited. So I think it's really going to be an inflection point for us to have that. And we're all watching it very, very carefully. So this is, if you say what's the #1 priority for the city, this is something that is a must be solved. Court infrastructure, I talked about this, but just a few highlights. I could talk about this for 2 hours uninterrupted, but the Parker Pump Station, wow, the Parker Pump Station. That is, if you haven't been by the site or if you haven't been on our Project Coronado page to see that, I recommend it. It is the largest scale infrastructure project we have done here, certainly in my time, but probably in the past 20, 30 years. It is now upwards of a $30 million infrastructure project. It's going 40 feet underground in a really difficult site. You know, you've got those sandy soils in Country Club in the Bight, right? You have a constrained site with the Navy on your back and homes right there. Very large pump systems. It's been a very technical thing, but that is getting done this summer. And actually we hope to have the pump part done in the spring and that turned on. And then just the finishing, there's gonna be an above ground electrical room and a management facility and like the grass for a dog park. So the whole thing should be buttoned up by the summer. You will have a celebration. And if you're an immediate neighbor, thank you for your patience. I know it's been very impactful, but you can't overstate how important this infrastructure is to maintaining the stormwater and wastewater pumping facilities for about 200 acres there. Another thing we're doing, second bullet, also sounds bureaucratic, but is very, very important. This is a wastewater fee study. So everyone pays a portion of your sewer fees, and that fee is set by the city through a public process that you can all participate in. But what we do is we project out, here are all of the capital projects we're going to need to do to make sure this system is going to work for our community. And this is the amount of staffing that we need to maintain the system to a high standard to be able to serve the community. So we are in the process of assessing and analyzing that right now. And we need that to make sure we've got appropriate funding to fund the projects that we need. So this process is going on right now. We will probably be bringing a presentation on the wastewater fee study to council in March. So please watch that because it's an important discussion. We've not adjusted the wastewater fees. Mike, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you remember doing that in your 8 years on council?
We did do that during that time. It was controversial. Good luck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, well, I will be taking you to lunch and giving a full rundown on that. Okay, so maybe like what, 8, 10 years ago or something?
Probably would have been in 2010, 2012, 2013.
Okay, thank you. So that's a very long time to go. Normally you see these rates modified every year, even by CPI. So we have not even kept up with inflation. And we know what inflation's been doing since 2012. So typically when I've done these in my prior lives is we've done updates on the fee study about every 5 years. And you typically have an escalator annually to keep pace with CPI. So we are very far behind. And as we know, we have need. We're definitely in a new paradigm of potential for rain events and other storm events. And when you have a flat island that's tidal dependent on stormwater side, you realize you have to do more, which is the next one. Stormwater projects needs assessment. So we do have stormwater projects that we have in the queue and they're working on and looking at. But I was talking with our public services director, Leon First. If you haven't run into him, he's excellent and doing so much for us. And we decided that this is actually what we need. We need to have someone come in and do a full-scale needs assessment and actually model for more severe and more frequent rain events than our current system modeling. So it's something we look forward to doing, studying to make sure we have the right projects going. And then speaking of projects, we have a few that are going on right now. One is at a pump station at First and A. You might recall about a year ago on January 22nd, that we had severe flooding in that area, and there was a transformer blew up and it affected all sorts of things. So we need a better solution to make sure we can drain water from that area. So we're adding actually a pump station on the port property to help move water out more quickly. Also, Five Points, a hotspot for flooding. We have a project there, more work at Vandell and Transbay station. So here's an interesting thing. So the Transbay pump station is at the ferry landing. Does anyone, do you recognize that, or do you know it's there? Yeah. So that's incredibly critical infrastructure, because what that pump station does is it takes in all of the effluent wastewater from the entire city, from all the way down the Strand, even the training complex, all the way up. And that is the pump station that pumps all of that under the bay and over to eventually to Point Loma where it's treated. So if something happens with that pump station, we have serious issues here in town because we're not able to move wastewater out of our lines. So anyway, this right now is overlaid with grass. And when you water grass, and then water as it gets into an underground pump station can create issues. So we're looking to resolve that. And then finally on this slide, looking at our pavement condition index and alley conditions. So our pavement overall, we're exemplary, especially if you compare us. Our roads are great, our alleys are not great. And as everyone knows, so we are looking at alley condition assessment and actually finding and getting just a cycle of projects to tackle cleaning up and correcting some of those alleys. Okay, I will move a little more quickly through this, but I talked about the organization. So things that are on my mind, retention and recruitment. And there's a reference to turnover, and it's so true. Post COVID, many cities saw a lot, and maybe in other employment too, there was a high degree of mobility with workers. People were really moving around. So we've settled from that. But in the short time I've been here, I've appointed 6 or 7 executive positions. And that's a lot. That's a lot to do in just 3 years. And so our leadership team they're fantastic. I'm so proud, it's really the best. But making sure that we are keeping the best employees, we're attracting the best employees is something I really think about. How are we an employer of choice? And it does help when it's Coronado that's inviting you to join the team. So know that really, we're so proud to serve such an incredible community. And it's really, there's huge cachet, of course, to come and be a part of the community. IT health assessment, that's looking at, we have pretty archaic systems. For instance, we just moved to electronic time card system 2 weeks ago. Before then, we were on paper, yes. And so I say that is just an example of we've just not, I think we could have had investments in some of these systems to make things more efficient for us. And so there's a number of things we're looking at. I could spend an hour talking about that, but I won't. Records audit, likewise, we want to increase our transparency. We want to have more of our records digitized and available for you to find, self-service. That's easy, rather than saying, hey, I'm looking for a resolution from 1998, and then we have to go dig in a file room somewhere and find it for you. So working on that, and then policy reviews and updates. Some of our policies are quite out of date, so we're working on it. So this is all the internal things you don't see, but we still have energy invested because we need to make sure the organization runs well, so that we can support the community. And then future planning. So I'm very excited about this. And actually there's another bullet I can add. We are right now launching a complete fire and EMS means emergency medical services community risk assessment. And what that is having a consultant come in, take a look at Coronado, look at our demographics, look at our development patterns, our housing patterns, looking at our calls for service, and saying, and then extrapolating, projecting those into the future. So we have a nice model of what Coronado will need in the next 50 years in terms of fire protection services and emergency medical services. And this is really important, and communities do it because if you're going to plan for major infrastructure, which we are, you really need to know where you're going and have a vision, have a sense of even how these services may evolve over time. So you may have heard that our 2 fire stations are over 50 years old, the one right here and the one in the Cays, and very much in need of upgrades. And so this study into where we're going for a service model will be pivotal for us to be able to design and develop what those fire, probably rebuild of those stations will look like. So I'm very excited. That will take about 6 months this year. We'll be presenting that to City Council, I'm hoping around summer. And I think that will really then launch that planning process for new fire stations. Next one's similar things to the facilities assessment, just looking around and making sure we can characterize our building conditions and the investments we need to make sure that we have durable buildings that don't fall into a point of neglect where it's going to take, 2x the money to restore them to something. So this is good, prudent government, just to make sure you're taking care of your assets. We want to characterize that. And then the long-range financial planning is, you remember earlier in our conversation, I said, earmark the winter room, earmark the case park. Now we have 2 fire stations, right? So we're now getting into many tens of millions. And we have to think about how are we going to meet those challenges? We have strong reserves, but we're not sitting on $400 million. Not that it's 400 million, but prudent planning is you have to think about how we're going to meet those needs. What's the sequencing? What's the priority? How can we look at our revenue or expenditures over time to meet those needs? So we're going to have some assistance and have that conversation. You'll be a part of it. It's not something that will happen very fast, but it's very important for us because we want to do all these things, but we have to be careful with how we do it. But so I'm very excited to bring that conversation forward. Strategic planning as well. The city, we have a bit of a dated mission, and we also have a very different council composition now. And looking at what is our strategic vision and how do we plan and what do we do something? How do we do that? Because the one I found is a little bit old, and so I think it's time for that update on the whole vision of where we're going. And then the final bullet I don't have on here, it's in invisible ink, would be the next housing element. So I referenced before, we made it through, and a lot of creativity and hard work and great partnerships. We made it through, but we are concerned about the next cycle and what might be coming down the pike in terms of the numbers and the obligations of cities, because there's a strong push for more and more and more housing. But one size fits all is generally terrible, and is especially terrible for us. And so we are inserting ourselves very early in the advocacy on this one to really understand what are on people's minds, what are they doing, how can we influence the process to get to more common sense policies. Because again, in prior cycles, our housing number was 50. This last cycle, it was 900. And plus they added another 15% buffer. And so the scale difference was pretty wild. Okay, major projects. I think I'm getting to my time, so I will speed up a little bit, but I referenced a number of the first ones, kind of about halfway through single-use plastics ordinance. So council started that conversation in December, giving us direction on some policy contours, what they would like to see into regulation of single-use plastics. So we are currently developing that, and I think we're bringing it back at one of the upcoming meetings for first reading. I talked about the undergrounding projects, utility undergrounding projects. So Adele and Inez, that's already really getting to the point where we're getting closer to construction, but we need to form a resident district for First Street. So we're working on that. And then we also had another, I wouldn't say wrinkle, but consideration come into place, and that is the Navy. So, the Navy has their shore power, and they've ascertained that for the next class of carriers, they need more shore power available. What's there is currently insufficient. And so they're talking with SDG&E about that. And so now we have 2 different parties, and they need to upgrade the substation and get more power. So we're like, perfect, and we can overlay our undergrounding with your need for a bigger pipe, basically. And we are fighting really hard to have 1 trench, not 2 trenches going up First Street, because that's antithetical to what we need. So we're fighting hard for that, and also not to have Coronado foot the bill for this thing. So anyway, Navy's been great on this, but we're just making sure that we're all centered and working together to work on this project. But that might accelerate that a little bit. The electric fire engine, did everyone hear about this? Electric fire engine, yeah, so very exciting. And I will say, news I just heard yesterday from the fire chief is that this electric engine we purchased is actually manufactured in Austria. And we all volunteered to go out to Austria, but here I am. But we did send a crew out there because it turned out that the manufacturer, Rosenbauer, had one that had come off the assembly line. And they said, do you want this one, or do you want a custom build? A custom build would be about a year. And we said, okay, we're intrigued. So we sent a team out there. So we have some fire crew and a mechanic out there, and they ran it to the ground and they tested it, and they determined that actually this one's going to meet our needs. So that's really exciting, because that means that we'll be able to take delivery this summer. So we thought it'd be a year out, which is great, because if you heard the whole presentation, our current fleet of fire engines are also aging. And so it does help move one of our engines off the line and the other one into reserve. And so that's gonna be very exciting. We will for sure have that in 4th of July parade. if it's here, for sure. I mentioned Parker Pump Station already, so very excited about that. Orange Avenue beautification. This is another exciting project that council has wanted for a long time, where we are looking at the entire visual aesthetic down Orange Avenue, really the business district areas that way and this way, looking at our street furniture, looking at our signage, looking at our bike racks, looking at our sidewalk treatments, and just making sure everything is brought to a higher level of beautification. It's safe, it's clean, and we have a common vernacular across all of our street furniture. So there's really unifying design, elevated design. It just brings our downtown areas up to a higher level of beauty and beautification. And then I talked about wastewater and storm drain. So I think, in the interest of time, again, I could go on and on, but I'm very excited to say that the city's doing great. We have a lot of ambition and a lot coming forward. So with that, I'm happy to take questions if you have time.
Questions? We have a 5-minute break for coffee, break, and then we'll get to the question and answer period. 5 minutes.
It's not like you can say, oh, plug it in the wall, you know, that'll take 3 years for it to charge. With it, you know, I would assume that if they're planning on upgrading the station. About they're actually very excited. Compared to diesel, he said, you'd be surprised that the performance it actually outperforms. Said charging, not an
Yeah, I don't know.
That's definitely favorite. That would be a mutual aid. And the other thing was maybe my the diesel exposure to diesel has really been, you know, reported some huge rate of associated cancer. Yeah, it's
When I was in Motors, I smell it easy. Everybody says
same thing with, I mean, my career. I smell burning 85. It's like, sweet.
back in the
She mentioned January 22nd. We came literally that house in the water. Came into the garage and right up to the sill.
So your tires and boxes.
Well, no, actually, I was at work in Chula Vista, and our office is down in the basement, so I kind of wasn't thinking about it. We had called my wife. Said, hey, she said that the garage on this. I'm going home, and I had to park 2 blocks away and pull my to get to my house. And it actually receded pretty quickly. But the damage, so to speak, was there. We never replaced it. We have seen or experienced it. I think because it proceeded so quickly, it makes you think right now.
Yeah, you don't always have to.
But that's at least the third time we've had that one.
Well, I learned a little bit less.
Well, we're fortunate because my wife's got a lot of her so, but all the cabinets had about 8 or 10 laying on. So the bottom's got a little bit of land, but it won't get that much damage. But I'm going to ask her. One, I'm glad to hear it was actually supposed to be finished. When they first signed it, finished it. You took that down. The QR code says for details on this link. So, one of
If you could all take your seats now, we'll get to the question and answer period.
yeah. What makes it?
The first question will come from Mr. Green.
Hi, Tina. I'd like to ask you about street sweeping. I live at the corner of D and Olive, and with all the debris that the olive trees drop down all year long, and the stuff we've had from the winds recently, we've got lots of leaves on both streets. And it's almost impossible to get them clear to have any trucks come by and suck all the stuff off at the edge of the street, and that will build up and eventually start blocking storm and going right to the ocean and being very cookie out there.
Thank you, great question. I think everyone heard that about just street sweeping. So yeah, we've had over time a pretty aggressive street sweeping. Like the frequency that we sweep our streets is actually astonishing relative to other cities. However, we're very much stymied because of all the parking, right? So very often we find we're not able to get cleanly to the curbs and scour and sweep everything out. And so what we're doing internally right now is we're actually looking at revamping our street sweeping program. And we're thinking about maybe we need to change some frequency because going down the same street and doing a 5% job isn't really efficient. So we're looking at how maybe doing different zones and actually doing no park areas in certain times, not like ongoing, not like putting up the signs, you can't park here on Tuesday from 9 to 12, but giving a lot of advance. If we know there's hot spots, particularly around the storm drain inlets, and I appreciate you raising that, saying like we repeatedly cannot get to these areas because there's always vehicles parked there. And that just leads to system problems. So we're right now looking at this as very early days, but it's something the prior council was interested. We're interested from a staff perspective about being efficient and being more effective. So right now we are doing some extra cleaning, you know, preparing for the rains that now we want to come, right, to get here. But it's something we're looking at. So yeah, point well taken. It's something we're working on, and it's nothing we would just surprise the community with. We definitely talk about it, but we knew we needed to change.
Next question, JB.
Good morning, Cal. Good morning, Tina. Thank you very much to you and your staff. I've been a resident for 4 years and have found the staff always very responsive, and obviously you're doing a great job planning. So thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question is about the Parker Pump Station in particular. One, I'm glad to hear that it's going to be done in the summer. I live right around the corner and have been enjoying the noise, dust, and all the commotion that goes along with it for quite a long while, but I know it's for a good cause. What mitigating measures does the city have between now and the summer when that project finishes and we do get some rain, we lived through January 22nd last year and don't want that to happen again.
Thank you. Another excellent question. Again, thank you for your patience and understanding that, yes, it's painful now for what, 2 years? You've been enduring it, all the neighbors have been, but in the end, this is a multi-generational piece of infrastructure that is absolutely needed. So the question is, what are you doing? And absolutely. So we have, since January 22nd, been working very, very hard to plan for this coming winter and in a variety of things. But in terms of actual redundancy in that particular area, what we have in that location is we actually have a temporary pump already set up, and we have hose lines ready, and we have another backup pump. So what we did last year is when the pump station was compromised, is that we pulled in these temporary pumps and we put hoses down and we had them acting. These are temporary above ground diesel generated, diesel fuel operated pumps that would do that. So we have 2 of them that are there and ready to go. The primary and another backup if something were to happen. We also obtained a lot more hose and line. So last year we were actually looking around, we need like fire hoses. And so the fire department was getting hoses down to us to make sure we can run these. So we have a lot more of that stockpiled, and we have other emergency pumps and generators around. So that's just in sum what we're doing. We are planning for the eventuality that something could happen. We did not want to be surprised enough to deal with it in that moment. Yeah, thank you.
The next question is from Zoom. I'll let you read it.
Okay. All right. Can you comment on the size of Coronado's reserves and how the spending policy works relative to the projects mentioned earlier? Thank you so much for that question. Yes, so our reserves are quite healthy. Actually, our general fund budget is about $74 million, over $100 million total budget with our enterprise funds, and our reserve is double that amount. So we have our general fund, and we have another basically 100%. Some of that is set aside for certain uses, emergency use, et cetera, but our reserves are extremely healthy. So the city could operate for quite some time without taking in another penny. However, pertaining to the other questions, our reserves could do some of those projects, but not all of those projects. And that would have to be a conversation with the city council and the community around, do we want to use reserves or not? So our actual reserve policy is for 6 months of operations, which is already a very conservative policy. In my prior cities, it might be something like a 3-month operations. So you would be saving 3 months of operating cash in your reserves. We're at 6 months, and then we have 12 months. So we are in a healthy position, but not healthy enough to do all of that. And I don't know if the council or the community would want to draw those down quite significantly. So it's a factor in looking at the entire puzzle of how we fund and finance that. But I would not recommend us solely relying on our reserves to accomplish everything. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but I appreciate it. It's something we're very much looking into, and that's part of that long-term financial planning that I talked about in your future planning. We'll take all of this into consideration. Thank you.
Next question, Tom Mercer. Tina, Tom Mercer. The 2 quick questions. On the wastewater fees, do we pay those with our property taxes, therefore the owner, or are they paid through Cal-Am, therefore the resident?
So the Cal-Am is your water bill. So for your drinking water, the wastewater is on your property tax roll. Yeah, so you see that in your property taxes. Yeah.
Another question is the previous carriers, XO and CO up at Alameda. We spent a lot of time down here even then, including the 2 change commands and all that type of stuff. But you didn't mention the 3 carrier question. Has that been resolved?
See, I love the questions in this group. I would say, as I started out saying, the community in Coronado is like just heads above everyone else. Thank you so much for that. Yes, something we're watching still very carefully. And so the question is about the 3 carriers. So you know that right now, North Island has been authorized to be home port for 3 carriers. And right now, under environmental rules, they're allowed to be here concurrently. Oh, I'm blanking on the number. Mike, 29 days?
29 is 29.
29 days, or yeah, thank you. So that means that all 3 of them are only supposed to be here 29 days all at the same time. The Navy wants to increase that to 180 days. So we could have 3 carriers here all at the same time for 180 days, fully crewed, you know, if there's air wings on it, it could be even more staff and personnel. And they're doing that because they're thinking Coronado needs to play a larger role in the positioning of the fleet and thinking about the Pacific, of course. So for us, we're of course thinking about quality of impact and traffic and thinking about having 3 fully loaded carriers here for, half the year. It's a very different situation. So we've got a lot of attention on this. So where this is that the Navy has to go through an environmental review process under federal environmental regs. It's called the NEPA process, if you've heard that. And they had their initial scoping meeting about a year ago, and the city attended, many community members attended their scoping meeting. It was held at the community center. And then they expected to release their preliminary report, maybe within 9 months. It's still not out. And when we talk with the Navy, they say, well, now they're kind of juggling a couple of projects. They've got that one, and now they have the increasing the power to the pier to power the Ford class carriers. And so it's still not out yet, that report, but please rest assured, we're watching it very carefully. We care a lot. I know that Navy traffic or traffic in town is motivated more than one council member to seek office in town. This is, in fact, issue number 2 is traffic. So we're watching it very carefully. So stay tuned. And as soon as we know something, we'll be sure to share it out with the community so you can be apprised and participate in whatever sessions the Navy might be holding. So great question. Thank you.
Next question from Dave Lynn.
Hi, Dave.
Thanks very much. I know your dance part of this morning every day, so I appreciate it. More mundane question from the carriers, but the California Institute passed a law about ordinance about parking this past year. It took effect in January about parking within 25 feet of a crosswalk, whether marked or unmarked. My question is, how is Coronado going to implement that parking?
All right, thank you. And if the room couldn't hear that, and for those online, the question was about, I think it's AB 1413, and it was a law about parking is not allowed within 20 feet of a crosswalk in order for pedestrian safety, so you don't have conflicts there. So the way the law is crafted, and there's been news about it, who's red curving and who's doing what around the region. And what's interesting is several cities already have these rules in place and haven't red curved. But the law actually places the onus of compliance with the driver, not with the city. So we have no requirement to red curve and make all those physical changes. It is incumbent upon all of us not to park within 20 feet of a crosswalk. So right now we're assessing, but we are not launching a large scale red curving project at this time. Yeah, thank you.
Next question.
Thank you for your service. Hasn't the Case Park master plan been rejected by the will of the people? We represent Stop the Case Park master plan and save the playing fields. Yes, the restrooms are decades behind. Yes. Anyway, hasn't that been rejected, the Case Park master plan?
The Case Park master plan was approved unanimously the last time it was discussed in October or so. There had been a split vote on it earlier in the summer, and we brought it back because there was some council members felt there were some information gaps, and in the absence of that, didn't have the full confidence in it. So we did some additional work. We brought back cost estimates. We presented that, and the council unanimously approved the park master plan. And what the council is expecting to have happen is that once we get through a little more engineering design, we are going to look at various components of it. And at that time, the council could decide what the council wants to afford or prioritize doing. So the plan is approved, and we're moving forward with engineering and costing and all those things. And just like any project, it's possible it could modify in the future, but that'd be for future councils to discuss. And possibly not this year, just looking realistically at timelines.
Next question for Tina. Right here.
Hi, Tina. Bill Garn. I've got a question for you about parking, particularly angled parking. How come it seems to be always on the east or south side of the street? And when is it coming to my block between 8th and 9th?
Okay. This is amazing. So one thing about being a city manager that's great is you do have to know a lot of things, right? You do. You have to be able to like, oh, I can talk about this. Sadly, I'm not a traffic engineer, so I will have to get back to you on that, why there's a pattern of having angled parking in certain ways and when it's coming to your block. Well, I think there's no plans to bring angled parking anywhere else, so I think I can answer that. But how that developed, that pattern of development and decisions, I don't actually know. But I will find out and we'll get a coffee and I'll let you know. Okay?
The next question is from the other Tina.
Hi, Tina.
First of all, I'm just amazed at what you've been able to accomplish since you started here. It's not an easy job. I've served 7 city managers, not you. But I will tell you that the staff here is amazing. And thanks for taking care of the human resources as well as the citizens' needs. 2 just real basic questions. I've lost track of where recycled water is. And I'm curious to know when the budget will come forward. I think it's May or June.
Okay, great question. Thank you, Tina. So first for the recycled water, and that this is referring to the water treatment plant on the golf course that had been brought to a certain point. And right when I got here, it was on the cusp of do we award the contract for construction or not. We ended up pulling back from that decision because the cost estimates far exceeded our engineering estimates. And we also ascertained that there were additional regulatory steps we needed to take that we're not quite primed and ready for it. So we pulled back on that. Then we were sued twice by a neighborhood group of folks alleging that there was some environmental deficiency in our review of the project. So those lawsuits are proceeding through the court system. On the first case, the city lost at trial court but prevailed on appeal. So we've now won in that case, and that's cycling. The second lawsuit, the judge decided to take them in sequence as opposed to combining them, which we requested. So we have a lawsuit where we prevailed. We've got one that's still processing, and we'll see. And so that has been a factor in us until we have kind of, if you will say, clear title on it. We've been a little stymied. Also, something we're watching very carefully is that Cal Am Water is currently studying a recycled water pipeline to come from San Ysidro treatment plant, come up the Strand. So now, and they're currently doing a feasibility analysis of that. Our public services director, Leon Furch, participates monthly in those meetings. So we're very much tracking it closely. That should be out this summer. But it's something we're very interested in seeing because we need to look at the cost efficiency of if our water provider is going to pay for a recycled pipeline coming up the Strand, and we could bring that over, and that could help with median watering and the golf course, and we just have to build a very limited reverse osmosis plant then in terms of a large scale treatment plant. We want to look at that. So we're kind of in this holding pattern right now while we wait for more resolution on the legal front and also additional information around could this project be an alternate or a complement? We don't know. So that's where we are. So we're still kind of in a wait and see. So second question is when the budget is going to come out. We are starting, and this is our annual budget process, and our fiscal year starts on July 1. So typically in the spring is when we're developing the budget, processing it, and we bring that forward to the public and council. So we're kicking off our budget process in February. It's personally my favorite time of the year. And everyone at staff will laugh at me. And they play that Christmas song, the most wonderful time of the year, because I'm very excited about it. Because the budget is our representation of our goals and our values. And it's so exciting because it represents what we hope to achieve in the next year. So I know you're in government, Tina, so you're laughing at me. That's okay, everyone does. But we'll kick that off in February, and I think that we will release the budget likely in May and have our budget hearing in May, and we like to adopt that in our first meeting in June, so it's all buttoned up and ready. So that's probably the same timeline.
Next question from Fred Carlson.
Yes, I'm a Cades resident and wondering if there's any development on the boat storage on Grand Caribe Isle.
For that question, yes. Yes, I'm very happy to answer that. I guess you haven't heard. So we have outstanding news on that one. So just for context, if you're not immediately up to date, there's the boat storage there on Grand Caribe Isle that the port had leased to an individual. And he had wanted to develop a hotel project there. It was called Cottages at the Cays. And it was supposed to be this modular product. But our community had a very strong reaction to that. Going, no, very strong reaction. In addition to completely changing the character of that area, it actually is in opposition to the port's own port master plan update that designated that land for recreation, passive recreation, open space. And so we were really at odds and very unified in opposing that. So really great news is last month, the port unanimously agreed to buy out that lease. So the port is spending $3 million to buy out the duration of that lease. And then in the interim, so they're going to get that lessee out of the picture. The port is going to assume management of the storage for a while. They need to recoup their investment of the $3 million to buy out the lease. And then when that is done and they're estimated, they're not clear, so they're a little loath to estimate, but I think it's probably going to be a little over 5 years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Then we'll start working on taking that out and implementing a park there. So the upshot is that our port commissioner, Frank Tassin, worked very hard and personally. I would see him at City Hall negotiating personally on this for a while, and the entire board agreed to spend $3 million. So there's no hotel project happening. So you'll have boat for a while. I think it will be better managed though, because the port's already been a lot more responsive to some of the issues that have come up that I hear about too. And if you have issues, you can always talk to me because I talk to the port all the time, but very good news. Thanks for that question.
Next question, Morgan Mello.
Tina, thanks for a great presentation. I know that when at an SDMAC meeting recently that Brad Rosen was saying that, hey, I want to beat the Marine Corps. They're talking about all these electrification and putting in like more power chargers and all that. So I think it relates also to the carrier question. So maybe we'll see hopefully more electrification on that base, so right here. But I also really loved hearing that one trench idea. But back to the Marine Corps trying to be self-sufficient. Did you, in the discussions with the Navy, is there more like, it sounds like they're relying on SDG line. Is there any discussion like them putting in more solar or things on the base itself so that they can be more self-sufficient for the 3 carrier issue?
Thanks, Morgan. Nice to see you. I would not dare to presume to speak on behalf of the U.S. Navy on this, so I can just share a little bit of my conversations with like the CO. And the CO is very interested in looking at microgrids and what can happen. Kind of like I think Miramar, is it Miramar? Well, Marine Corps, right? So he's very interested. So how that might evolve, how that might manifest, I don't know yet. But it is a conversation he's raised with me, saying, hey, I just want you to know, like my outward vision is how do we have more self-reliance and some own self-generating energy source. So yes, that's definitely in the picture. Thank you.
I will turn it over to our president.
Really happy to have you join us this morning. So our next meeting is February 28th, where we will have Neil Centuria from the UT. So please come next month. We look forward to having you here. Thank you all for coming, and thank you again, Tina.